Hey, folks, how's it going today? Hey, I got a question for you guys. Do you believe in global warming, or as I refer to as climate change? Many do, but many just call it global warming. Uh, Real or not? Let me know. Okay, put it in the comments if you think it's real, if it's fake, or if it's blown out of proportion. Because today, my guest is Alan H. McGowan, and he could be found at alanhmcgowan.net. It has been selected in 2019 as a top science and technology expert by the International Association of Top Professionals. He also received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Marquis Who's Who that same year. Now, we go on to talk about how weather conditions can vary and change, and how severe weather conditions can occur really any place at any time. We also talk about Franz Boas, and Franz Boas was a pioneering anthropologist who challenged the notion of racial superiority and was involved in political activism. We also discuss science as a way of looking at the world and collecting data. Now, we really get into talking about climate change. So, again, do you believe in it? Is it fake? Or are you kind of on the fence? So, once again, this is with Alan H. McGowan. Let's get right into it.
Welcome to Amazing People, Amazing Things with your host, Chuck Tuck.
You are the author of political activism of the anthropologist Franz. Is it pronounced Boas?
Boas.
Boas.
Pronounce it. Yeah. I am.
'Cause-
I am. I wrote a book.
Yeah,
What do you think about that?
and what a book it is!
Oh,
I mean,
thank
such a
you.
long title.
Thank you.
Social, cultural activism and everything else.
Yeah,
It's
right. He was quite a guy, actually. Quite a guy.
Yeah, I read a little bit about some of the stuff that he had studied and looked into and what he was all about, and it's really quite interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, he was a pioneer in his field. He was the first professional anthropologist to call into question the notion of racial superiority. And he spent a good deal of his time and effort disproving that notion. But he was also very active as a pacifist. He strongly opposed the U.S. entry into World War I. And in the 30s started an organization that protected the free speech of people who were accused of left-wing, even communist affiliation. So he was I think, a model of what a scientist should be. He was deeply involved in his own science, but he had a public-facing activity as well.
It's almost like I started thinking of him as the people's people.
Yes, right. Yeah, he was the people's people, the people's scientist. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially when he's talking about you have to take each culture within its own context.
Yes.
And not lump everything into one and say, like you said, one is more superior than the other.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Yeah.
but that's what your book is about.
Yeah, that's what my book is about. Yeah.
But
I want people to know about him, number one. And I want people to know that you can be a leading scientist at the same time having a public persona and political activities.
Well, that would be you as well.
Yeah, well, that is me. Yeah, right.
Because you're into science denial of climate change, vaccinations, the safety or the unsafe nuclear power and all that stuff.
Right. Yeah, all that stuff is right.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you because of that word science, and the term has come up so often since before the before time, but now during the during time, meaning during COVID and everything, we started talking about science.
Right.
What is science? What is the definition of science?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, because different people define science in different ways, and you have the so-called natural sciences, physics, chemistry, biology, and the social sciences, political science, sociology, even anthropology. But basically, it is the a way of looking at the world, collecting data, developing hypotheses about how the world works, and then testing those hypotheses with real experiments and data. Obviously, the social sciences cannot do as many experiments as can the natural sciences, but nonetheless, they believe in data-driven ideas. So it has produced some great benefits to society. It also has produced some problems that society has to deal with. And one of the problems with science denialism, which is really an important problem, is that there are issues we need to discuss. Artificial intelligence is a very good example. It's here to stay. It can be very powerful, but it's like a knife. A knife can be used for good, it can be used for bad. And the same thing with artificial intelligence. It can provide a fake voice that sounds exactly like my voice and your voice or somebody else's voice. And it can perpetuate the disinformation or misinformation that is so prevalent on the web these days.
That is so true and so scary, because we've gotten used, I think many of us have gotten used to the fact that what you read may not be true on the internet. That's what we read. But with artificial intelligence, like I said, now we've gone to, okay, what if I hear it? What if I hear it from somebody of authority?
Right.
Now
Right.
you can clone that voice, even even the face.
Absolutely. I mean, it's crazy to think of that, but that's exactly what can happen.
Yeah. The other thing that I really want to touch on is climate change. That's also really, really important. And I think not just because I'm from Washington State and, this is the green state, but
Right.
there are so many people who do not believe in
Right.
climate
Right.
change. And I personally like to use the word climate change as well, because you hear a lot of people say, they might say global warming or something warming, and then they'll say, hey, it's not warm here.
Right.
It's cold. It's colder.
Right.
Well, we're talking climate change,
Yes,
and that means
right.
warmth or cold.
Yeah.
Could we talk about that, about climate change?
Yeah, well, a good friend of mine who actually is a diplomat and was the special advisor to Kofi Annan at the United Nations calls it global heating, because that's in fact what is happening. The average temperature is increasing, and that is what happens is it puts more energy into the atmosphere, so that you get greater extremes. You get colder weather as well as warmer, hotter weather. And the level of the storms increases because hurricanes and cyclones get their energy from the warm water in the ocean. And obviously, the more energy in the ocean, the higher the temperatures, the more intense the storms are going to be. And it also produces dry conditions, so that you have rampant fires in places, California, Australia. All of these things are as a result, not that we didn't have fires before, not that we didn't have storms before, but they are more intense now as a result of climate change. And there are two levels sort of disbelief. One is, okay, yes, it is happening, but it's a natural occurrence. It's not due to human activity. And the second denial is, well, it's not happening at all. So we need to combat both of those areas of disinformation, of climate denial.
Now, I've also heard from folks about climate denial. They say that's not a change. It's only a fraction of a degree, but we're talking about averages, and a fraction of a degree makes a large difference. Is that
right? I know.
Correct?
I mean, that's one of the issues that we have to face. So it's increased by 1.1 degrees. What? That's all? 1.1 degrees? That's not much. But when you think of the huge atmosphere, 1 degree is a great deal. Yes, if you have a pot on the stove and you increase the temperature by 1 degree, that's not a big deal. But when you have an entire ocean, just think of it, an entire ocean, and it's increased by 1 or 2 degrees, that's a huge amount of extra energy that's contained in that ocean.
And I think not only, with the ocean and the 1 degree, 1.1 degree, or 9/10 of a degree change, it changes the ecological system as well,
Yep.
which will affect everything.
Yes.
I mean, we get our food, we get
Yep.
a lot from the ocean.
Absolutely, yeah. We get a huge amount of nutrients from the ocean, and along with climate change, and related to it to some extent, is the lack of species diversity. Species are getting extinct, and a robust ecosystem, one that is able to sustain storms and so forth, is one that has a great many species contained in it, so that the lack of diversity is actually going to produce some problems down the road.
Yes, absolutely. And, going with that, you made me immediately think about the Great Barrier Reef.
Yep.
Barrier. It's a barrier to protect.
Yes.
It's a living organism.
Right.
We cause climate change. Temperature goes up even a half a degree.
Right.
You're going to start killing that stuff off, and
Yep. Right.
it affects so much.
Yeah, exactly.
How do we go about getting people to understand that fractional amount of, change in the weather makes a huge difference?
I don't know. The person who really answers that question is going to get a Nobel Prize. I mean, I'm an executive editor of a magazine called Environment, and we try our best to portray information to the public. We are increasingly looking at the humanities as a way of presenting data to people in a way that they can understand. We just published an article by a really great scholar on Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which was a runaway bestseller and which told a lot of people about the dangers of DDT and had a great deal to do with the curbing of the use of DDT. And I just spoke to a person this morning who does climate art. She does wonderful, both cartoons and works of art that express the problems in the environment. So I think we need a great many different ways of communicating with people. I'm used to 4,000 word technical articles. Okay, I can read those, but the public is not going to read those. So
Yeah.
we need stories, we need poems, we need all kinds of different ways of reaching out to the public. I also think that we need to involve lay citizens, non-scientists, and get them
Yes.
to invite a scientist to the PTA meeting, to the Rotary Club meeting, to their discussion groups. Because when people see a scientist face to face, they may believe that person a lot more than just reading stuff on a printed page.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and I think it would be a great service to everyone if schools would do that.
Yep, right.
Especially, if they could even start at a young age, maybe the 5th or 6th grade,
Absolutely.
just to trigger an interest in this.
We learned something from the smoking crusade. The smoking crusade got to the children, and the children would say, "Hey, Dad, put out that cigarette." It was interesting. I have four grandchildren, and the youngest one, a couple of years ago, was as I was brushing my teeth, came into the bathroom and he said, "Grandpa, you can't leave the water running while you're brushing your teeth." I said, "Okay, you're getting it. You're getting it." So yeah, I think we have to start at a very early age, and just induce in the young people an understanding of what harm to the environment is all about and what can be done to counter it. Because frankly, the young people are gonna be what who do it.
Uh, Yeah, there's a couple of things I want to say. It's funny you mentioned DDT because mentioned that earlier on a podcast
Uh-huh.
today. But for those of you who don't know, look up DDT, what it was and what it did. And I believe they stopped DDT in about 72 or something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. Yeah, 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 yeah,
And then,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the one thing that when you're just talking just now, it just made me think is, yeah, you and I grew up, we saw Smokey the Bear
Yeah.
as well.
Right, right.
We knew
Exactly.
about forest fires and all
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
I
exactly.
don't see that kind of stuff
No, I don't
anymore.
either. That's a very good point. I agree. I didn't think about that, but that's exactly right. We had Smokey the Bear, and Smokey the Bear told you to be careful about fires because they could cause forest fires. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we need more of that kind of information given to young people.
Yeah, like a national mascot or
Yeah,
something like
right.
that.
Exactly. Hey, that's a great idea.
Uh,
That's a great idea.
There it is.
Hey, there you go. There you go. Chuck, you can become famous presenting the idea of a national mascot. That's a terrific idea.
Well, that's the one thing I'm going to go a little bit off topic. This is the great thing about having conversations with professionals, such as yourself, experts. It triggers thoughts in somebody who, like me, who is not a
Yeah,
an expert or professional, and I think about it on that layman's term
right,
kind of thing.
right. The most profound questions come from people who are lay citizens, but who think about things and have questions about things. Those are the questions that we need to answer. So
Yeah.
I congratulate you on your role. You play a really important role in the world of information. You really do. I salute you and congratulate you for doing it.
And I tip my hat and say thank you. So, just continuing about the climate change and everything. Uh, what evidence is there? And we did talk about this a little bit, but what evidence is there? Hard evidence that change is happening.
Okay,
Whether it be,
so we have two things. First of all, we have measured the level of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, but mainly carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We can measure that. And we know that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased. At the same time, we can measure the temperature, the average temperature, and the average temperature has increased. Now, correlation does not necessarily mean causation. That is to say, just because those two things are happening at the same time does not mean by itself that they are related. However, we know the mechanism by which the carbon dioxide causes the increase in temperature. What happens is the sun radiates energy to the earth. It heats up things. Those things then radiate heat outward, and it's a different wavelength than the energy that came in. And that different wavelength is what is trapped by the carbon dioxide. So we
okay.
understand the mechanism, we know the correlation, and so we are 99.9% convinced that it is what is causing the levels of increase. We also
So,
know, as a result of some experiments from volcanoes and so forth, that have put dust in the air that has cooled the atmosphere because it blocks the radiation coming in. So we think we understand a great deal about the mechanics of the atmosphere, although it's very
okay.
tricky because it's a very complex system. As you can imagine, there are air currents, there are clouds, there is rainfall, there is snow, there is ice, there is sleet, all kinds of things. But centuries of study have convinced us that this is what is happening.
Yeah, like you said, with the air currents and things like that, we'll get dust pollution from other countries, other areas, forest fire, smoke, all that stuff. The other thing too um, is it, it's more than just industrial automotive that causes that carbon dioxide
Yes,
pollution. It's
yes,
agricultural is a
yes,
huge thing, and
absolutely,
you know
absolutely.
we which tells me that we do have to find a different way. Well, this might be far reaching, but we do have to find different ways or methods of producing foods
Yeah,
to
yeah,
eat
yeah,
food.
yeah.
Um,
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. The farm factories. I mean, look, we went into these things. I mean, the Industrial Revolution, which is what brought us to fossil fuels, actually was a benefit overall to society. People were able to live more successfully, they lived longer, and so forth. And the same thing with the agriculture. It has produced food that is relatively inexpensive. I mean, sometimes I don't think that when I go in the grocery store these days, but, and agriculture has allowed, not everybody needs to be on the farm. Some people can be working as entrepreneurs and so forth. However, we do have to change. And there's good news coming from the global climate change research. We know what to do. We have ideas about what to do, and there is this thing called regenerative agriculture, which uses fewer pesticides, less fertilizer, more so-called organic growing. I don't know if you've ever been to an Amish community.
I have not.
Okay, well, you go to an Amish community, and because of their religion, they do not use pesticides, they do not use fertilizer, and they don't use mechanized plows. And yet, they produce a huge amount of food on their acreage. So, we know how to do this. It's just a question of changing the rules of the game so that we grow food. And look, it's a problem. Population is increasing.
Yes.
We need to feed more and more people. So we need to figure out how to do this, and there are lots of ideas about how to do it. We just need the political will to ensure that some of these things happen.
You know, I think it'd be really cool if um, contractors, home builders out there, when they build on a lot, and lots are getting smaller and smaller,
Right.
but they um, something is sectioned off, or maybe there's an ordinance where 1/3 or a percentage of that property that they build for a garden, making
Yeah.
it a
Right.
raised
Yeah. Yeah.
garden,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I think a lot of people want to, but they
Yeah.
just don't get around to doing it because they don't have
Yeah.
the room or they don't have
Right. Right.
some means of doing it.
Right. And community gardens are increasingly interesting phenomenon here in New York City. I live in a high-rise apartment, that's right next to other apartments. However, first of all, I have Central Park, which is a great benefit. But also, there are many vacant lots which have been turned into community gardens. And a colleague of mine at the New School studied these community gardens. And sometimes a group of people work on the garden themselves. Sometimes each person has a particular plot of land that they cultivate, so that one can do a great deal with that. There's also this thing called vertical agriculture, where you have layers of platforms and you can grow things in those layers of platforms, even inside.
Mm-hmm.
So there are creative ways of doing these things. Uh, there's not one solution that is going to solve everything, but we have a variety of approaches that we can take that would ease the amount of greenhouse gas that is emitted by the agricultural system of today.
And you kind of mentioned like the younger generation that's coming up now. They're finding that this is important. I just hope that they don't go too far in uh, the positive direction, turning it into a negative somehow. But the new group of kids, people growing up, and even us, we talk about taste and health. It If you grow your own, not using the pesticides, it does taste, to me, in my little garden that I've had before, it does taste better.
Oh, no question about it. I grew up with a big yard in the backyard, and we had what we called during World War II a victory garden. And we grew our own corn, we grew our own tomatoes, we grew our own string beans, we grew our own carrots, beets. We grew everything. And the month of September, my mother spent canning. It was before we could really freeze things, so she canned tomatoes. I have to say, if I never look another canned tomato in the, I'll be very happy. But yeah, and most of our neighbors also had gardens that they tended. Now this was in the suburbs, and we had a big yard, and we were able to do it. City dwellers cannot do the same thing, but as I said, with these community gardens, you can take a step in that direction. And not
Well,
everybody has to grow their own food. I mean,
right. I have a neighbor that I'm only going to guess. He has a nice sized garden in his backyard, and we just live in a little housing community. But he grows enough fruit to where he puts out
really,
vegetables out front because he's got more than what he needs for his
yeah,
family.
that's what happens. When the corn gets ripe, it all gets ripe at the same time.
Yeah, but
And we
right.
we would do the same thing. You trade, you give it away.
Yeah, I have, I hear conversations and I have conversations with a lot of friends who just happen to move into a house that happen to have a fruit tree,
Oh,
and
yeah,
they don't pick the fruit, but they should. Some of them are now starting to post on social media, come to my place and pick all the fruit that you want
right,
before it goes to
exactly,
waste.
right, right.
Uh,
Well, I grew up with a cherry tree in the backyard. My father said that cherry tree just feeds the birds. Which
which is true.
was true. It was true.
I got to tell you that a house that I bought, I moved in and it was mid-August, latter part of August, and I remember waking up on the Sunday morning, and I was like, "Darn, I don't have any food in here," and I have fruit trees,
Uh-huh.
and I had the most delicious pear.
Great, great. Yep, yeah.
But um, I, I'm going to apologize to you and to the audience. I know I'm getting sidetracked on certain things because
It's okay.
I think with this science and with this climate change, that encompasses a lot, and a lot of different things affect the climate. We
Yep,
talked about
absolutely,
agriculture.
absolutely.
Um, so,
But a real culprit is the use of fossil fuels to
mhm,
produce the energy that we need to run our economy. And here again, we know what to do.
yeah.
We can fuel. I did the calculations just a little while ago. We can fuel the entire amount of electricity that we need in the economy by solar cells, and it only takes up a space of 22,000 square miles. Now that sounds like a lot, but that's less than 1% of the entire landmass of the United States. So that you can imagine lots of creative ways to stimulate the use of solar panels on rooftops, over garages, over highways, over all kinds of ways, because we need very quickly to move away from the use of fossil fuels to produce the energy we need. That's an essential thing to do.
Now, can I think I may have pre-warned you during our little NPS conversation that I'm going to be a devil's advocate.
Good,
May I play
good,
the devil's advocate
good,
now?
good. I love it. I love it.
So if we're talking about, we'll take solar energy
Right.
and solar panels as an example, and if many people are going to have them, isn't that going to take a lot of copper wiring or something? And aren't we going to need a lot of
You've
that?
hit upon a really important issue, and that is the use of materials that are necessary in order to have a truly renewable energy economy. Copper wire is one of them. Lithium is another. Lithium is very important for the batteries that we need in order to really produce energy with solar cells, because the sun doesn't always shine. We need a way to store the energy that we produce during the time that the sun is shining. Lithium, unfortunately, is in some of the countries that we don't like very much, and the mining of it produces significant hazards to the people who are mining it. So, as is often said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. This is going to be difficult to do in real terms. I mean, it's one thing to have a few solar cells, but if you have the entire country filled with solar cells, there are some really important issues that need to be worked through, and the material need is one of those things.
And here comes that part when I mentioned we were talking about the younger generation coming up and they're aware of this. And I said, I hope they don't go too far in one
Right.
direction, the
Yep.
good, making
Right.
it bad.
Yep.
And that's exactly it for
Yep.
lithium batteries, because they
Yep.
hear about cobalt.
Yep.
And they say, well, there's no way I'm going to do that because it's tearing apart the land, and it's a danger to
Yep.
those kids.
Yep. No, all of that, and what that's why we need a large society conversation about how to do these kinds of things and what kind of advances are necessary in order to accomplish the task. For example, sodium, which is very similar to lithium, is being researched as a replacement for lithium. Sodium is much more available and much easier to deal with than lithium. So there are some technological advances that we still need to accomplish in order to make this as successful as we all want it to be. I mean, everybody wants it to be successful. And I will raise another controversial issue, and you can be devil's advocate with this as well. But I think we need to continue the use of nuclear energy and invest in some of the so-called fourth generation nuclear plants, because otherwise we're not going to have the total amount of storage capacity we need in order to have a totally 100% solar cell fueled economy. You need some of the energy that is a so-called base load.
Okay, I'll be the devil's
Yeah,
advocate on
good,
that.
good.
Just one moment. I'm going to go back to the battery. We're talking about the sodium. Now, with the sodium battery, though, when to match the capacity of a lithium, wouldn't the sodium batteries need to be much larger and they become heavier, and then there's more maintenance on that?
Yep, exactly. So it's a trade-off, and it all depends on how serious you think the global climate change issue is.
Okay.
If you think it's minor, then you don't have to do these things. But if you think, as I do, that this is a really serious threat to our civilization, heat is a killer. And the intense heat that is being felt in many different places is only going to increase. I mean, you're talking about the possibility of people trying to live in 120 degrees Fahrenheit. That's hot, man. That's hot.
It is, and honestly, when it comes to that, I hear more often that people are dying of a heat stroke or whatever it might be than freezing.
Yes.
You know.
Right. Yeah, heat stroke is a problem. I mean, particularly, the older you get, the more vulnerable you get. and if you have any kind of immune problem or a heart problem, or the heat is just going to intensify your difficulties.
Yeah, and talking about that part for folks who don't know, if somebody has some sort of issue like that, perhaps maybe diabetes or
Right,
something,
right.
the heat causes stress on the body,
Yep,
and then that's what affects
yep. That's
your
right.
health.
That's right.
I think more so than the cold.
That's right. More so
So
than the cold is right. Now, I mean, being frozen is not a good thing.
no,
I'm not advocating people being frozen.
no, nor am I. But you do hear about cryogenics, but you don't hear about baking people.
That's true. That's certainly true.
Oh,
Yeah,
Alan, so you just mentioned about nuclear power and stuff, and a lot of people are afraid about the safety of the power plants.
yeah,
Me, I'm not so much concerned about the safety because I do believe that it is safe and a clean
yes,
energy
yeah,
source. My only thing is maybe the byproduct or the waste.
yeah. The,
Uh,
the waste is a
uh,
problem. There's no doubt about it. And we haven't really been terribly successful at solving that problem. But I think actually it's a political problem, not a technical problem. We can store
mhm.
it and pretty safely. It doesn't have to be put underground. There is above ground storage, and people say, well, it needs to last for 10,000 years. Okay, yes, it does, and maybe that is a problem. But again, it's a question of how serious you think the issue of climate change is. I think it is serious enough for us to rely, to some extent, not a huge amount, maybe 15 to 20% of our energy coming from nuclear means. And the mining of uranium is a problem. It causes problems. But overall, the death per kilowatt hour of nuclear is far less than fossil fuels or even solar energy.
Yeah.
So,
I did see a program where they were talking about being able to reuse the waste, the byproduct
yes,
from nuclear
yes,
plants, and
yes,
they're talking about doing some sort of splitting of the atoms and this and that, and they
right,
could use it up to 16 times
right,
before
right.
it becomes real waste. But
Yep.
then by that time, it's not as bad for the
It's not
environment,
as
I guess.
radioactive in the environment. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's what I mean. There are technological advances which have taken place, and more of which need to take place in order for us to solve some of these problems. And that's one of them. And the new so-called fourth generation nuclear reactors are very much capable of having that recycling feature to them.
I guess this is the other thing that people have to understand is when we talk about things like this, we're not talking about the immediate remedy of it.
Right.
It's we need to advance, and in order to advance, we have to start now.
Yes. Yeah.
In order to
Right.
progress and
Exactly
advance.
right. Exactly right.
Um,
And one of the
I
characteristics of the Anthropocene, which is what we are now in, is that there is a certain level of uncertainty. We're used to being able to predict exactly what we think is going to happen, but that is not what the Anthropocene is all about. So we need to advance. We need to do some things and then look at the effects of that. I mean, even solar cells, for example. We don't know what the United States would look like if every place available had a solar cell on it. We don't know what that would do to the ecosystem. But so we have to constantly be aware of developments and take studies and take data and do experiments to make sure we're doing it correctly, and be willing to change course if a given course doesn't work out.
and that's called science. You're
That's called
taking
science.
data,
That's
and
called
it's
science.
not going to. Yeah, it's not okay. Here's the answer,
Right.
and it's the answer forever. Nope, that's
Nope,
not.
nope. Science is a process. I mean, one of the things I tell incoming students at the New School is that you don't hate science, you just hate the way it was taught. because we need to reform the way we teach science, because too often it is taught as a series of set facts. It's not a series of
Yeah.
set facts. Every fact, so called, is open to question. It's a process by which we
Yeah.
constantly increase and improve our understanding of the world.
And you're absolutely right, because I'm going back to high school thinking, and it was a step fact.
Right.
That's what science was, or that's how they taught it,
Yeah,
and it
right.
is not that.
It's not
And
right.
and I think so many people still think that way.
Yeah.
I mean, going back to thinking about the vaccination, the
Yeah,
vaccine.
right.
It,
Right.
it you're collecting data and it changes.
Right.
You can't say,
Right.
oh,
Right.
they said that it was this way. And it's
Yeah.
like, no.
Right. Yeah. And we, I mean, look, we're facing with the mpox, which used to be called monkeypox epidemic, that is now in the developing world, but it's apt to come to us. We have to work to develop a vaccine for that. Interesting irony. When I and probably you went to school, you were given a smallpox vaccination. As a result of that, smallpox now no longer exists in the world. So people are not vaccinated against it anymore because they don't need to be. However,
Yeah.
smallpox vaccination protects you against the mpox. So the irony is that we defeated smallpox, so people don't have to be vaccinated, so they are more susceptible to mpox. So we have to develop a vaccine. So, like I say, there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah. It's science is a wacky thing, and
Science is a wacky thing. That's exactly correct. I like that. I like that. Science is a wacky thing.
it's going back to climate change and energy,
Right.
renewable resources, and things like that.
Right.
You hear about solar, but also wind.
Yeah, wind is very
Power.
important. Yeah, wind is very important.
But I'm going to be that devil's advocate on this one. So we hear about that, but then we read information as far as the giant propellers,
Yeah.
the materials that they're made out of,
Right.
whether it be
Yeah.
some sort of
Yeah,
resin
yeah.
and fibers.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Look, I mean, like I said, there's no such thing as a free lunch. It's you're gonna have to pay the piper at some point.
Yeah.
The only thing I can say is that a windmill made of that material and those materials which have to be mined and manufactured, that's a lot better than
drilling and mining for
drilling for oil, or a strip mine, which you just remove the whole topsoil and get to the coal underneath. I spent 2 years after graduation as an engineer working for a public utility, which built huge coal burning power plants producing electricity. And I visited a couple of those strip mines. They are ugly and they just destroy the environment. So I'd much rather have a windmill made out of resin and material than a strip mine.
And I guess it's going to take a shifting of the mind for the general populace to understand that, look, like you said, there ain't no free lunch.
Right.
You're going to have to decide,
Yep.
do you want to save the environment, or do you want to, whatever it might be?
Right.
Do you
Yeah,
want to
yeah.
get to the store faster, or
Right.
whatever
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, which is another tough thing to do, which I think also all of this needs to go back and start. My personal opinion is in schools where
I
we-
schools are key. Schools are absolutely key.
yeah,
And starting very early, and that's why I think the humanities are important. Kids need to read stories. They read stories. Well, they can read stories about climate change, energy, solar energy, etc., and become more familiar, so that it's part of the things that we accept as being okay, rather than this strange apparatus.
Yeah, because 50 years ago when we were in school, um, we were being taught probably almost the same thing, but it should change. I think with the times,
Yeah.
it should
Right.
it should
Yeah.
change with the
Yeah.
not generational, but not decades, but
Yeah.
there should be
No,
change.
I totally agree. Look, when the automobile first came into being, people wondered at it. Oh my God! And when the telephone came in, people said, "Well, it'll never replace messengers." Well, it did, and now we're so used to it. That's why we
Yeah.
need to be much more familiar with the solar cells, with wind turbines, um, than we are now.
We need to turn the schools into something that's fluid.
Yeah,
There needs to be
right.
fluidity.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And the better schools are. I mean, basically, I think the public school system. I mean, people decry the public school system here in New York, but frankly, I mean, my grandson has graduated from Morrow High School, which is a public high school, and did extremely well, and is now off to Sarah Lawrence to college. So. The public school system really does a pretty good job. We've got to introduce some of these concepts early on, but it's a pretty good system as it is.
Yeah, and I think you used one of the words earlier about climate change and certain things making change. A lot of it is political.
Yeah. Oh boy.
Unfortunately,
Whatever.
in
Yeah.
schools,
I mean, at some level, my friend, everything is political. Everything
yeah,
is politics. Um,
yeah.
and I think
Line my pockets here, and I'll fix something for you over
Yeah,
there.
right, right. I mean, there is a program at Yale University called the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication, and it shows that well over 50% of Americans think that climate change is real, and also think that something needs to be done about it. But the politicians in Washington aren't listening to that.
Yeah,
And
no,
we have a system that I think is broken at the moment.
I agree. Alan, we need to let people know where they can go to get your book, find out more about you, and find out more about, what your life's work has been about, and that's about the science and science denial. So where are
Okay,
they going to go?
terrific. So I have a website, Alan H. McGowan, AlanHMCGOWAN.net. If you type that into Google, you come to my website. The book is Citizen Boas, one word, .com. You type that in and you come to the website of my book. And I also do publish a Substack newsletter, which you can click on in either of those websites, where I talk about some disruptive technologies. So that's how you find out about me.
Well, excellent. I think we need to get you back on again and talk about disruptive technologies.
Oh, okay, all right. I'm
So,
game.
uh,
I'm game.
and I hope that includes AI and
It includes AI. It includes, I mean, I'm just working on a newsletter now, with the gene editing capabilities that we have,
CRISPR.
which is CRISPR. Yes, CRISPR, which is a significant advance. On the other hand, we might be slipping into eugenics as a result of the capabilities. So there's no advance, particularly these days, that doesn't produce its ethical questions which need to be discussed. I mean, they are advances, there's no doubt about it. They are beneficial to humanity, but there are also dangers involved with them. And that's why we need a full society discussion about these things to make sure that we decided that we needed to regulate pharmaceuticals, for example. That's what FDA is all about. So that's successful. Do we need to regulate artificial intelligence? Probably we do. How do we do that? What does regulation mean? All of these are political, social questions that are really pretty important.
We've got a few minutes left. You opened up a little box there, and I'm going to ask you something.
Okay.
I know, folks out there in the audience, we hear the term, the acronym, artificial intelligence, but you're hearing more of AGI,
Yes.
artificial general intelligence.
Yes.
And there's several different types of artificial intelligence. So AGI is, to some, is probably one of the more scary ones.
Yeah. Ray Kurzweil, who is a significant author, has just published a new book in which he claims that AGI is possible. That is, that you can think of sometime in the future a robot which acts and thinks and even has feelings like a human being.
Mm-hmm.
That is pretty controversial. Many in the field do not think that is possible, but we will wait and see. And my own opinion is that we need to be prepared for that, should it happen to be true, because that raises all kinds of pretty interesting social questions. If a
Yes.
robot can mimic a human being, that's not necessarily the good news.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that a little bit real quick as far as the social aspects go, on AGI,
Right.
robots, androids, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
If we get to that point, my fear is with history now, if we don't teach history, and I'm talking more along the lines of like slavery,
Right.
we have these robots who are robots,
Right.
servants.
Right.
Then they become to the point where they're not going to be sentient beings. They may not have what we call the touchy-feely and the
Right.
human senses,
Right.
but they'll have their own
Right. Right.
through the circuits and everything else.
Right.
Now, we are telling them what to do, and we begin to treat them as a subservient
Yes. Right.
entity.
Yeah.
I'm having a hard time really putting this out because I know it sounds far-fetched and scary, but I think if we lose sight of what history was and where we came from, we're going to repeat it all over
Yep.
again, but we're going to repeat it with
Absolutely
these
right.
robots.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. One of the reasons to study history is to avoid the mistakes of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And we are in danger of doing that. I mean, it's one thing to have my word processor finish my sentences, which it does, sometimes annoyingly so. I didn't mean to say that. It's very different to have robots that can mimic my voice, that can mimic your voice, and can act in ways that we do not want machines to act. So this is a really important issue, and we need to talk about it now before it starts happening. Because if we start talking about it now, then we have a chance to develop some method of control. The problem with AI, it happened too fast before we were really socially ready for it.
Yeah. Socially ready. That's each one of us.
Right. Each one of us. Now, AI is important. I've used Chat GPT on a number of occasions to ask questions, and it will go into the internet for me and find information that I need to get. The problem with Chat GPT, as you well know, is that it so-called hallucinates.
Mm-hmm.
It lies. It tells you things that are not true.
Right.
We don't need any more of that. We have enough of that already. So that's what I mean. We need to figure out what the controls of this should be.
Yeah, it's
Not
a
easy.
deep
Not easy.
no.
Not easy at all.
It is not.
Yeah.
And the generation that's growing up now are going to use it more and more and
Oh,
more. In
absolutely.
fact, they're going to they're going to rely on it.
Absolutely. They already do rely on it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And there's that word
I
lie.
mean, good heavens. I mean, when have you ever seen a teenager without their phone going on it and playing games and doing whatever? Now, again, technology is wonderful. You and I can Zoom. This is technology. You and I don't have to be we're
Mm-hmm.
3,000 miles away, but it's like you're my next door neighbor. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a real advantage of technology. So technology is a good thing, not a bad thing. We just have to be careful with it.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you on that. Folks, once again, we're having a conversation here with Alan McGowan. He is the author of Political Activism of let me say this correctly. Political Activism of Anthropologist Franz Boas.
Boas, you got it.
Boas.
You got it. You got it.
So this has been fantastic. I mean, I love this stuff, and I know the audience does too. And I could go on
I
and
love
on
it
and
too.
on and
I
have this
love it too.
conversation.
I love it too. That's my life.
So,
Okay, Chuck.
well, thank you very much for your time today, Alan.
Thank you. I loved it. It was great. Thank you so much. And congratulations on doing what you do. What you do is really important.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed the podcast as much as I did. I really learned a lot and had a great discussion with Alan. So please, if you have any comments, put it in the comment section. Let me know, because podcasts like this, I think, are really important to everyone. You know, it's a great place for discussion. It's a great place to learn different things. Speaking of discussions and learning, if you're a pet owner, please be responsible and have your pets spayed or neutered. Thanks again for supporting this channel. Hope to see you again. Until next time, keep a smile on your face. Bye.